BEMP Science and Education take place on current and ancestral lands of the Pueblo, Diné, Navajo, Apache, and other displaced indigenous peoples. BEMP acknowledges that this land was forcibly stolen by European colonizers, and that the detrimental effects of their presence through violence, displacement, and disease are still impactful today. We offer this acknowledgement as a first step in honoring the indigenous peoples and their ancestors, and as a call towards further learning and actions as guests in this place.
La ciencia y la educación de BEMP se llevan a cabo en tierras actuales y ancestrales de Pueblo, Diné, Navajo, Apache y otros pueblos indígenas desplazados. BEMP reconoce que esta tierra fue robada a la fuerza por los colonizadores europeos y que los efectos perjudiciales de su presencia a través de la violencia, el desplazamiento y las enfermedades todavía tienen un gran impacto a día de hoy. Ofrecemos este reconocimiento como un primer paso para honrar a la gente indígena y sus antepasados, pero también como llamada para un aprendizaje y unas acciones más profundos como huéspedes en este lugar.
Hello all, and welcome to BEMP's 2023 Crawford Symposium. My name is Zoe Wadkins-Daniels. I'm the Education Manager at BEMP, and this is my boss, Abel. I would like to begin with a quote by one of my favorite authors, Robin Wall Kimmerer, author, mother, scientist, decorated professor, and enrolled member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation. Quote, "Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift." Over the last several years, the COVID-19 pandemic has had an unprecedented effect on the educational and broader sphere. Despite the many variations of learning that schools, teachers, and community partners readjusted to, BEMP Education did its best to meet our community's broader needs at every turn, taking all necessary precautions to ensure public health and safety. BEMP Education reached 5,032 students and adults through in-person contacts alone, engaging 48 different schools and community organizations throughout April of last year to today, and we're still going. Instruction was provided in person and remotely at field locations and in outdoor and on-campus classrooms through field monitoring collections and in study trips. We also offered an ongoing array of educational programming provided online through printable and electronic platforms, including self-led activities and video lessons. Moreover, university students participating in the Biology 408-508 internship course conducted field and lab work during this time. If this time has taught us anything, it is the deep value of engaging audiences through our broader ecosystem, encouraging us all to see ourselves connected to, rather than separate from, one another in our more than human world. Due to these shifts and challenges, BEMP's 2023 Crawford Symposium will look different than it has in the many years previous. Our hybrid format, including both online and in-person gatherings, is evidence of this. Our gathering together is also an honoring of Robin Wall Kimmerer's words and work. It's a creative display of the joy and inspiration that the earth offers, and an effort to continue to return that gift. May this year's Crawford presentation serve as a beautiful display of our community's creativity and transformation during this time. Given all of our need to pivot, I want to particularly recognize the ongoing efforts of our schools, our teachers, our students, and families for not only participating in our educational programming adventures, but for their willingness to show up exactly as they were amidst another difficult and trying year. Thank you for your joy and your laughter and all else that you brought to our team. To those of you in the audience, thank you for showing up in support of our youth and for all you do to assist BEMP in remaining an integral component of the Middle Rio Grande. We are all truly grateful. Enjoy the show.
my name is Layla, and what I think of BEMP is there are so much things to learn and things I have not learned. There is like such a fun experience that BEMP comes with. They're like a triple experience, fun, exciting, and adventurous. In all, I love BEMP and I really enjoy it. I also love how you help me identify a porcupine in a tree. What I really liked about BEMP is I learned that if you grab a stick from a tree and you open it, and if there's a star, that means it's a cottonwood tree.
Hi, my name is Annie Montes, she, her, and hers, and I am an environmental educator with BEMP. One great way students can get involved with BEMP is by doing monthly monitoring. This can be done in the field, at our various sites, or on their very own campus. The next presentations will show us what students did for monthly monitoring and what they have done with the data. Enjoy!
Hi, my name is Rowan Lissaway. I'm a student at Bosque School, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about what we do in BEMP. Every month, our grade splits into two groups in order to monitor the two BEMP sites near Bosque School, Savannah and Montano. We walk to the site we are monitoring that day, where we divide into smaller groups to collect leaf litter data and well depth data. We do temperature data and rain gauge data as a group. After we collect the necessary data and we have time, we play some sort of nature-related game like camouflage or echolocation. After we get home that night, we copy our data into a Google Doc that a teacher sends to you or now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joseph Campbell. Over the last 10 years, BEMP has been working hard to preserve all of their data, and today we will be creating a graph to compare the last 10 years to today. With the recent drought, we can guarantee that the data will have a significant change over the years.
Thank you. My name is Tristan, and I'm going to be going over a graph on the Montano site. So, since 2019, the water levels have been staying the same, but there was a significant increase right before 2020. But after, the well depth before touching the water has only been past 200 centimeters 4 times, as you can see. According to information from the government on drought.government.com, New Mexico's most recent drought was in 2021. You can see a dip in the water starting in 2021 and happening 4 times until 2022. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sagan, and I'm going to go over the well depth at Savannah site. This graph shows the east well consistently having less water than the other wells, closely followed by the south well. The well that usually has the most water is the north well. Similarly to Montano's site, Savannah site had the highest levels of groundwater in 2019, right before 2020. In 2020, there was the biggest drought recorded in this graph, and in 2021, there was a drought of similar magnitude. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
BEMP! By Iris,
June,
Orion, Luke, and Hazel.
Some things we love about BEMP.
We get to be outdoors.
We get to see animals in their natural habitat.
We get to help UNM gather data.
It's right by our school.
We get to learn about Bosque ecosystem. What we do.
We gather clipboards, pencils, and data sheets.
We take a short walk to get to a site, either Montano or Savannah.
We split up into groups.
We collect well depth, leaf litters, rain gauge, etc.
We come back with our group and share our data that we collected for the day.
Well depths have gone down since September. From September to February, depths in both the Savannah and Montano sites have ggone down over 50 centimeters. The depths have consistently changed over the seasons.
So as you can see here, we didn't collect all the wells, but you can see that it has lowered since September, and most of the wells stayed the same, like the north well and the nearby ditch, but some of the wells are dramatically different in each month.
This is our Montano graph, and you can see that most of the north and east wells stay at about the same place every month, even though that they do go down over the months. And then the center wells, they stay the same most of the time, and they are around the same area in the graph. Also, you can see that they have all gone down from September to February.
The Montano gauge is measured in millimeters, and we didn't collect the canopy gauge in November, but in October it had the highest numbers.
So for the Savannah gauges, September was really low for both of them. February was definitely the lowest month. October for the open gauge was the highest. Canopy gauge was basically around the same as September, and November we barely collected those. So November is basically the lowest.
Also, we are so sorry about the spelling of gauge in these.
Yeah, one of us messed up.
Thank you for listening to our presentation!
Yay!
We are Lucas Sandoval and Cohen Burkett.
We will be talking about our amazing experience with BEMP.
Before we talk about our data, let's explain what BEMP is.
BEMP is a fun experience where we go into the bosque and gather information.
Some of the information we gather is seeing how much water is in the ground, what type of stuff falls to the ground, and how much rainfall there is.
BEMP is a very fun experience with a lot of learning opportunities.
Firstly, build friendships with each other.
Secondly, it makes a deeper understanding of how our bosque works.
Thirdly, it helps set up for the future and set a good life goal.
To conclude, BEMP helps us in a lot of different ways and is a great learning tool.
Now we're going to show you some graphs from our data. So this is the Montano well. On the left, you can see the north well, east well, center well, south well, west well, and nearby ditch. On the right side, you see depth in millimeters. We took this well data during the months of September, October, November, and February. Now, this is the wells in Savannah site, the same through the same months and pretty much the same.
I will be talking about the precipitation we found. In the Montano site, we put out an open gauge and a canopy gauge. We recorded through September, October, November, and February. And the depth is in millimeters. We did the same thing, but in the site of Savannah. We measured everything in millimeters and did the same months.
Thank you. All right, now one more thing we want to talk about. You might be wondering why this data is important. Well, here is why.
Firstly, it makes us have a bigger understanding of our bosque.
It also helps us understand how the bosque changes through time.
One more thing that it helps us with is bringing our whole community together.
To conclude, data is super important and great.
Thank you for listening to our BEMP presentation.
Have a great day.
I'm Liana. And I'm Sophia. We're going to be talking to you about what we enjoy about BEMPing and what we do.
BEMP is such an amazing experience,
where you go into the bosque and also record data for the future years.
BEMP has been going on for about 30 years now. Students all over Bosque School were in BEMP field trips. In BEMP, we talk a lot about helping others and taking care of our bosque.
We enjoy the outside activities where we measure the canopy gauge, the open gauge, the groundwater, and the temperatures.
Some data that we had collected is how much water there is in the wells and how in the gauges, along with the temperature.
And when we go and look at the tubs, we collect what is inside of them and put them into paper bags. In conclusion, we really enjoy going on field trips.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tinley, and I'm going to be talking about the gauge precipitation for Montano and Savannah. So the blue is the open gauge and the red is the canopy gauge. So we collected data from September, October, November, and February. And something I thought weird about Savannah was that both the canopy and the open gauge were both 0.5 millimeters. instead of a difference, because normally the open gauge has more water precipitation than the canopy gauge. Thank you for listening to me.
Hello, I'm Ariana, and I'm going to be talking about the well depths. For the well depths, we collected during September, October, November, and February from Montano, and for Savannah, we collected them during October and February also. For October, the vein was between 200 and 300. For November, it was between 78 and 212. For February, it was between 77 and 218. And then for Savannah, one of the highest was the east well, and one of the lowest was the west well, even though we only collect, it was either one of the lowest for the west well or the highest for another portion. Same with the east well. It was either one of the highest or one of the lowest.
Hello, I am Josie, and I'm going to be talking about the bigger picture with all 20 years of BEMP data and what we found interesting when we looked at that. So here I have a groundwater graph from 2011 to 2014. And what we noticed interesting about the 2014 in September was that the groundwater was around 170. And usually looking back at past years, it's around 190 to 200. So the water table actually rose in September. And looking back 2 months before, we saw that the water in July for 2014 was 80 millimeters. Usually it is between 50 and 60 millimeters. So piecing these two data together, we found that data links to our hypothesis that infiltration is delayed in the summer months. We can see that the water in September was better, but the rainfall was normal. The water table went up though because of this huge rainfall in July, delayed because the ground was hard. The ground is no longer hard after the monsoon season, and it infiltrates easily before drying up again before the hurricane season again. Why did this large amount of water rain down in July of 2014? Well, 2014's monsoon season was an average monsoon season, but usually the hurricane spans from June 1st to the end of November. But in 2014, it spanned from July 1st to the end of October. So it was just the same amount of rain, but in a smaller amount of time. So that is why July got more rainfall, which is then why the infiltration took a while because the ground was hard and later affected the September water table. Thank you for listening to our BEMP presentation.
We are fourth graders from Miss Richards' class. Right now we're at the Sahara Tree. BEMP! Bosque! Ecosystem Monitoring Program.
BEMP taught me how to identify leaves. Now I can pick up a leaf and know where it came from.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Because of the rain, the grass is so big. This leaf is from the cottonwood tree. It has over 100 dots. Weird. And it has over 10 lines. Amazing.
That's cool, Rosalie. What do you have there?
It's a stick from a cottonwood tree.
Cool.
I learned it from BEMP.
Look at that leaf.
OMG, what's the point of it?
Whoa, I found a cottonwood stick. Whoa. If you break cottonwood sticks open, then you find a star.
I'm looking for ants, but they're so small. They're so strong. Smaller than a rock. So small. So strong. They can lift up to 10 times their weight.
It emerges during the first spring thaw. But if you look closely, there is
Look
four.
in this picture.
Look in this picture.
1,
2,
2,
3, and 4.
This is a horsetail, a plant that has joined stems. Branches go into whorls at joints. A fertile stalk has a cone-like head.
Wow, our bucket overflowed with tree litter.
Yeah, it did overflow. By the way, what's tree litter?
Tree litter is sticks and the leaves that fall and other stuff that pops from trees.
observation is to look closely. Maps are to find your way.
I wonder if there's seeds in there. I noticed there's like
BEMP! Bosque Ecosystem Monitoring Program.
Hola, soy Alea y queremos presentarles nuestro proyecto intercurricular Bosque Alebrijes. ¿Pero qué son los alebrijes? Se preguntarán. Los alebrijes son una creación del arte popular mexicano, fabricadas a base de papel maché o también de figuras talladas de la madera del copal. En una breve historia, fueron creados por el artista cartonero mexicano Pedro Linares en la Ciudad de México en el año de 1936. Pedro Linares cayó enfermo y durante un día con alta fiebre vio animales combinados con alas, cuernos, ojos saltones, garras y colmillos feroces, con colores brillantes y una voz que les nombraba alebrijes, alebrijes, alebrijes.
Mi nombre es Jorge. Con esta participación y compartir queremos hacer vida uno de nuestros valores fundamentales como estudiantes de la Escuela Bosque. Ser una comunidad enraizada en el bosque del Río Grande, territorio ancestral del grupo indígena pueblo. La historia cultural y ecológica del bosque es compleja y nos ofrece una ampliación extraordinaria de nuestras aulas, mientras que nos sirve como llamado a la acción para cuidar el medio ambiente y esta preciada fauna del bosque ribereño.
Mi nombre es Caterina. Quiero compartirles que para nuestro proyecto fue una gran utilidad en la creación de nuestros alebrijes, el apoyarnos del material educativo de BEMP que contiene icónicos animales de nuestro bosque ribereño.
Soy Eddie, junto con Lexi y Lucas, hablaremos del proceso para crear un alebrije. Nos centraremos en el proceso original de Pedro Linares. Utilizando papel, maché y cartón, primero te invitamos a elaborar un boceto de tu alebrije. Es de gran utilidad para que tengas una clara idea del alebrije que quieres crear.
Después de elaborar tu boceto, reúne todos los materiales. Ten presente que puedes hacer uso de materiales reciclados. Con el alambre vas a hacer un armazón o una estructura que define la forma de tu creación.
Antes de remojar el papel con el pegamento o engrudo, el engrudo es el producto casero a base de harina mezclado con agua que utilizan los cartoneros que crean piñatas y aplicarlo en capas. Tu base de alambre debe de estar cubierto por un par de capas de cinta adhesiva. Recuerda agregar extensiones de alas, antenas u otras partes para resaltar tu alebrije. Cuando seca, puedes comenzar a trenzar y pintar los patrones y detalles que lo harán una pieza única.
Aquí con ustedes Mila. Como estudiantes con herencia hispana es muy importante conocer más y mantener nuestras tradiciones con raíces culturales vivas. Recrear la técnica para elaborar nuestros alebrijes no solamente nos permitió aprender un poco más de este tesoro artesanal, nos permite transmitir, mantener ese arte en nuestra generación actual y futuras.
Gracias por la invitación para participar en este simposio. En nombre de mi grupo del 7º grado de la clase Herencia en Español de la Escuela Bosque. Recuerden, los alebrijes son importantes por su herencia y cultura para nuestra comunidad hispana, pero sobre todo son un homenaje a la diversidad. Por su atención, muchas gracias.
Hi, my name is Laura and I'm one of the BEMP educators, and today I'm here to present you some of the projects 9th grade students from college and career high school have been working on this semester. These projects are about litter on their neighborhoods. They have been walking around their neighborhoods, collecting data on different types of litter and where they accumulate, and if this accumulation might be due to weather patterns like storms or winds. At the end of this process, students have come up with a creative way to represent their data trends to a broader audience. Today, they will be presenting their research projects and their creative pieces and showing you what are the trends of litter in our city. We hope that you enjoy, and we hope to see you next year. Thank you.
My name is Zoe Rodriguez, and my project is litter data in Adobe Acres. First, we have my table of contents. There are 5 different segments in this project. My research question was, has litter in Adobe Acres over the first 3 months of 2023 caused an increase in social or environmental problems to residents? First, we have my background information. There is no doubt that litter is a growing issue in our environment and has continued to grow over time. What effects do the increased masses of litter have on people like you and me? Litter can ruin our earth worse than we could imagine. This would not only affect us, but it might cause a complete change in the way we define everyday life. It's important to learn where litter comes from and who is throwing it out on the streets. In order to see the trend of increase, we need to know what kind of person is the cause of litter. Many plastics cause a constant decrease in many environmental necessities like garden production and wildlife stability. This can cause a decrease in food supply and cause mass food shortages. We must figure out why litter causes these problems and how we can fight it. We need to understand the root of litter and its effects before we can solve it. Seeing the effects of litter in a smaller and more confined piece of land can help us get an idea of what it might be like on a larger scale. This is a map of Adobe Acres. Everything that is highlighted in yellow is where I got my data. Next, we have my methods. There were 3 crucial pieces to this project. First, I researched about life before 2023 and what litter may have looked like. During this step, I wrote down my information. In step 2, after writing down my information, I went out for around 30 to 40 minutes a day, deeply analyzing litter and people's overall emotions toward it. In order to do this, I looked at people's facial expressions, or even maybe things they mumbled to themselves while seeing the trash before them. In Adobe Acres, quite a few people like to take a stroll of the community, and so it was fairly easy to get this information. In step 3, I compared my initial research to my newly found data in order to answer my research question. Next, we have my results. In this graph, it shows 2 years, 2022 and 2023. It also shows the pounds of litter. In 2023, you can see that there's around 125 pounds of litter that were collected in the 3-month period. In order to gain this data, I weighed all of the litter. When I came across a piece of litter on the street, I picked it up, put it in a trash bag, and continued on. In 2022, you can see that it's around 100, which is quite a bit less than it was in 2023. The data that I got for the pounds in 2022 was still in a 3-month period in order to keep everything the same. In this graph, this is the amount of complaints due to litter. Adobe Acres is a tight-knit community full of family and just close friends. So in order to gain this data, I interviewed them and asked them how they felt in 2022 to the litter and how they felt in 2023. After gaining this data, I made it into percentages. In 2023, the amount of complaints about the litter is up to about 30%, and in 2022, it was only around 5%, which is an extreme increase. Lastly, we have my conclusion. In the end, we find that litter over the last 3 months in Adobe Acres has not only grown, but caused a negative impact on people. Finding the displeasure many experience due to litter is not a surprise. The amount of litter in Adobe Acres is growing and it needs to be stopped before we can do more damage. The pounds of litter taken out and found in Adobe Acres is quite big given the fact it's a smaller community. On a local scale, the litter is causing a deterioration of the people, but on a global level, it can cause the death of many animals and the breakdown of farms and other necessities. Here you can see a picture of one of the pieces of litter that I picked up and found. It's best if we all take action. During this project, any litter I came across, I picked up. Though it might not be yours, you should still help clean our planet. There are many ways you can help. Volunteer, posting online, or even just going out and doing it yourself. If you want to volunteer, contact Parks and Recreation Department at this number. Here is another piece of litter that I found. We have a creativity project that I incorporated into my main project. As you can see, I baked a cake. The top layer represents before 2023, around December 2022 to January 2023. The bottom layer is after 2023, around February 2023 to April. The green ball is people affected by litter per 100. Though it may not look like a lot, that is a lot of people given the fact each one of those is 100. The blue balls are the amount of litter on streets per 150 pieces. Again, it might not look a lot, but when you take into consideration the number that holds, it grows. The purple ball is the amount of litter picked up per 25 pieces. The ratio of litter picked up to the ratio of litter found is very little, and we need to do something about that. This is my works cited piece of litter that I found, and thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Garrick Tam, and today I'll be showing you my litter survey project. So first, what is litter? Litter is the accumulation of waste such as plastic, paper, glass, and other things that's been discarded in inappropriate locations. This can lead to a decrease in an environment's health since organisms are being poisoned. For this project, I walked around the CNM main campus every Thursday at 2:40 p.m. to determine whether or not the amount of litter changed over the course of 10 weeks. The question I set out to answer is, has the amount of litter on the CNM main campus increased or decreased over the course of January 12th to March 23rd? My hypothesis is, if I collect litter around the CNM main campus every Thursday at 2:40 p.m. from January 12th to March 23rd, then the amount of litter will decrease because less people spend their time outside during the winter and spring. So for this project, I wanted to determine whether or not the amount of litter on the CNM main campus changed over a 10-week period. Every Thursday at 2:40, I'd walk the same route to ensure that my results were as consistent as possible. Before walking, I'd record the weather, such as precipitation and temperature, and as I walked, I looked out for types of litter, such as plastic, paper, glass, metal, scat, and other things, such as cigarettes, until I got to the end point. The picture on the top is a map of the route I took every time I went to collect litter, and the image on the bottom is one of my recording sheets. So, after recording for 10 weeks, I used Google Sheets to tally up all my results and I put them into graphs. I utilized mainly bar charts to show my data, and I also added a trend line to determine how the amount of litter was changing. So for all of the graphs, the x-axis represents the week that I went to collect, and the y-axis represents the each amount of item I found. So first, I'm comparing the total amount of litter over the course of 10 weeks using a scatter plot and a bar chart, which seem to both be trending down slightly. Next, here are two graphs comparing plastic and paper. Plastic seems to be going down while paper is making a very slight trend upwards. Then I have graphs comparing the amount of glass and metal, which seem to be trending down drastically. And finally, these graphs compare the amount of animal scat and other litter such as cigarettes. Although they both have slight trends, scat seems to be on the rise while other litter seems to be falling. Therefore, the amount of litter on the CNM main campus changes over the course of 10 weeks. After I totaled the amount of different types of litter and found a trend, I was able to deduce that there's been an overall decrease in litter, with a few exceptions, such as animal scat and paper. Overall, it's great that the CNM main campus is seeing an overall decrease in litter over the course of January 12th to March 23rd. Us students can help maintain this trend by disposing of waste in appropriate locations, such as trash cans. We can also help pick up litter to reduce the risk of poisoning animals. The final part of my presentation is my creative project. For this, I used a Rubik's Cube to represent the amount of litter for each category. I made each color on a small cube to represent a certain value, which would then be arranged in a way that would result in the total amount for each given category. I created 7 unique patterns to display the total amount of plastic, paper, glass, metal, animal scat, and other litter, as well as a pattern for all of my litter combined to compare with the other categories. And these pictures show all the different patterns I came up with to represent each category of litter, and when the values are added up, they should equal the total amount. I'll give you a few seconds to look at it. And here's a key if you couldn't see it clearly in the previous slide. And thanks for listening to my presentation. Have a wonderful day.
Hi everyone, Shelby Bazan here. I'm BEMP Environmental Educator, and this year we had the privilege of working with Inez Elementary. We worked with their 2nd, 3rd, and 5th graders. We learned about the ecosystem on their campus, and we also made some art out of nature around the area and the environment around the area. So I really hope you enjoy their videos. Thank you. During our time together, we explored the ecosystem on the school's campus, learned about adaptation through different bird beaks, and created our own macroinvertebrates after learning about metamorphosis. Enjoy some clips from our time together during Science Club. Thank you, Inez Rockets, for having us.
Leaves, a bunch of leaves.
A bunch of leaves. What are you going to do with them?
Glue them to my paper.
To make what?
To make, I forgot.
Do you remember what they're called? What we're making? Starts with an M.
I got way too many leaves.
A mandala, right, exactly, good job. You got too many leaves? You probably did, but you could make them into smaller pieces for your mandala.
No.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm from Inez Elementary. I am 8 years old. I'm in Miss Frederick's class. I'm in 2nd grade. And my favorite thing about Science Club is I get to go outside.
My name is Madison. I come at Inez Elementary School, and my favorite thing about Science Club is that I like to play with the do binoculars.
Hi, my name is Samara, and I'm in 3rd grade, and I'm from Inez Elementary School. And I like finding things from nature, and science clubs.
My name is Samuel. I'm in 2nd grade at Inez. I'm in Science Club. I like nature because I love it.
Hello, my name is Bradley, and I'm in 3rd grade. My favorite thing about outdoor science club is looking at the outdoor classroom with binoculars.
My name is Paris, and I like going outside because I like the breeze, and I like going outside because we can look at nature, and we can use cool stuff to see close. And I draw this picture. It's of the stuff I picked out here, and it's from a really pretty tree, and I think that's it.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Good job.
Hi, my name is Matt Leister. I'm the science manager with BEMP. And another way students can participate in BEMP is through our UNM BEMP intern class. Up next, I'd like to introduce our graduate and undergraduate presenters. Thank you and enjoy.
Hey
Hey everyone, my name is Grant Forberg and I'm a student at UNM, and I'll be presenting on my poster about the Bosque collections. So the Bosque is a dear part of the New Mexican soul. We have it right next to Albuquerque. It's 1 million people that live right next to it, but there's very few resources that kind of want to catalog the floral diversity of the area. One of the major organizations is BEMP, where they look at litterfall data, cover data, and all other sorts of ecological long-term data. But unfortunately, something missing from these collections is actual collections where you can get a physical specimen. These physical specimens are important for the area, as you'd like to catalog it later for either genetics or checking out the phenology at the time or tracking the environment over time. So having an actual physical thing is very important. So to check out what we have here, I did a little synthesis of it by doing 2 different repositories, SciNet and GBIF, which I put together, cleaned out, used R, and now I have complete collections of the Middle Rio Grande Bosque. I started out at the borders at Cochiti Lake, and I went all the way down to Elephant Butte, and that's like the area cataloged as the Middle Rio Grande Bosque. So what I found was there was 755 collections there. 200 are held out of state, and the other 555 are held here. I wanted to check out how these collections differed over time, what counties are holding the most, or the most common species compared to the occurrences versus the cover data. So to do this, I downloaded all the data and I started working with it. One of the things that I first noticed was as collections started in 1800, they've been going all the way up to 2020, but it's been a nice linear rise with weird stretches where maybe people put more effort into collecting over like a unified effort. And unfortunately though, over the last 5 years, collections have plummeted here and it's almost 0, and the last one was in 2020. And this data needs to continue so we can get an accurate timeline of the Bosque over time. So that's something that's definitely need to be worked on in the future. Some of the most common families I found were Asteraceae, Poaceae, and Cyperaceae. And these are all like flowering plants that are smaller and grasses and a little bit more charismatic because they have flowers to them. So that was kind of noted as the most common families, but they're also the most common across New Mexico, so the riparian didn't seem to influence it too much. Over county-wise, Socorro is about half the area of the Middle Rio Grande Bosque, but it only accounted for about 40% of collections due to holes in the area with it not being collected near roads and less populated areas. Bernalillo, while only about like 15% of the total area of the Bosque polygon I made, they had like a significant quantity of actual collections at around 28%. And this is due to being closer to roads, urban centers, just easier to get out and like get those collections going. What we found as the most collected species was Yerba Mansa, which is popular in the community with medicinal uses and other programs for its cultivation and preservation. Looking at the most common one being Yerba Mansa, it was different compared to observations and actual cover at the BEMP sites. The most populated, like cover-wise, was the poplar tree, or the cottonwood tree, and the Russian olive. And the most recorded in iNaturalist for observation-wise was similar, with salt cedar and Russian olive being the most. What we found though is that Yerba Mansa and Russian olive were the only 2 species where you could see the same amount like of high occurrences and collections, while the collections didn't really favor too many exotic species like our salt cedar. They favored more native species that were flowering, and this is bad because exotic species are slowly replacing a lot of the native species in the habitat, and this should be looked at in the future as the majority of them will be more exotic, and like looking forward as conditions continue to dry out in the Bosque. So looking forward, we should spend more time focusing on areas that are less collected in counties like Socorro, where there's huge gaps in spots that haven't been collected, and the Pueblo communities right south of Cochiti Dam. These areas are not near roads or urban centers, and the collections there are lacking. I think a lot of the other collection focuses should be based on underrepresented families. That's about 30 of the major plant species families are not represented, with only like one collection in the whole area, which needs to be looked at a lot more. So looking forward, students of UNM or NMSU should look at collections moving forward in areas that are kind of not looked at as much, and underlooked families going forward. But looking at it right now, we need a lot of work to do to get the collections up where we need. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eric Fernandez. I'm a student here at UNM, and I'd like to talk about some of the great opportunities available with BEMP. So fires have become increasingly prevalent in the Southwest and have forced us not to postpone our ideas about successive ecosystem communities and therefore our methods for aiding in their establishment. During the summer of 2022, there was a fire that burned the areas immediately east of the Bosque School, an area which we're going to call North of the Deep Dark Woods, NDDW for short. Afterwards, winds swept up the fires across the river into the Aldo Forest area. A month before, though, this NDDW fire, there was the Reynolds Forest Fire in Belen, and then about a year before the NDDW fire, there was a fire in Tingley Beach, which is just south of Central, on the east side of the river. Whether we like it or not, fires are a main driver in any ecosystem. In this case, the ecosystems not only hold great value, but are situated next to and within the city. Some of the aims of current investigations in our ecosystems entail the understanding of how to manage the bosque in light of its future. One viewpoint is that there are complications involved with restoration, since this is a viewpoint based on the premise that ecosystems are reversibly changing and its water needs aren't being met and water availability is projected to lessen. However, there is the difficulty in seeing the end of this beautiful landscape presented by the bosque prior to and throughout the establishment of the Albuquerque metropolitan area. We naturally can't quite imagine ourselves without the serenity that it provides. Perhaps restoration could be worth it. Since these two things oppose each other, we need to address them with a sense of urgency. To do that, we must first study these burn sites and their impacts on our communities and our beloved bosque. So our vegetation communities are responding to these fires regardless of our preparedness to address the issue. How are they responding? Well, that's where BEMP comes in. In the summer of 22, BEMP, were able to run a pilot course study on these fires and their impacts. We took advantage of the timing of the fires and began our investigations. So here we go. Here, this is a graph of NDDW 2 weeks post-burn, and we can see that after the fire there, exotics showed regrowth while native woody species didn't. Both root sprouts from existing burn species and shoot sprouts from the bases of the burn species were present for exotic species. Cottonwood and currant had no regrowth. Russian olive and salt cedar had like the highest amount of regrowth post-burn. Reynolds Forest was a little bit of an outlier in the sense that there actually were native comebacks, whereas the other two had hardly any. And so here we can see that we've got currant coming in. And Reynolds Forest exhibited similar characteristics as NDDW, where no shoot sprouts were found for the native cottonwoods. But all exotic species studied had shoot sprouts, and all except elm had root sprouts. Now when it comes to the biopark site, there were no salt cedar or Russian olives within the study plots, but large salt cedar with regrowth were present just outside the plots. There were also elms and trees of heaven just outside the plot with robust growth. There was very little cottonwood regrowth, and the majority of the plots were exotic herbaceous species. Here we have a graph for average resprout heights, and we can see that salt cedar and Russian olive seem to outcompete cottonwood at the initial stages and onset of repopulating the burned area. However, there were a couple of cottonwoods that were pretty tall. Here we go, around 60 centimeters, maybe a little more at the biopark area. So suppose that's a little bit promising for our cherished cottonwoods. So let's go back to these studies. We had one at, let's say, 2 weeks, then we got one at 2 months, then we had one at a year away from the initial fire. And one thing to note that stood out to me was the way that each one of these changed by a factor of 10 with respect to time, which kind of was analogous to maybe a food transfer pyramid where energy transfers at about 1/10 the rate. That would need a lot more looking into and subsequent studies, but it was interesting nonetheless, which brings me to the second thing. In order for these studies to become really effective, ongoing study needs to be the case, and continuous monitoring needs to also be happening. And thirdly, I think that would be very well done with BEMP.
Every year, we at BEMP have the distinct honor of awarding an individual BEMP's Crawford Award, established to recognize people who support and uphold science, education, and stewardship. This year's recipient for the Crawford 2023 Award has been a phenomenal presence each month for many years, not only in our data collection efforts, but also in the lives of the youth he encourages. With this, I pass the baton to Matt Leister, who has the honor of announcing this year's award recipient.
Hi, my name is Matt Leister, and it is my honor to present the 2023 BEMP Crawford Award to Mark Hedge. Mark has been a teacher for 29 years before retiring in 2020, and during that time, and even past retirement, Mark shows his dedication to students by coaching for various programs, including Envirothon, Project Del Rio, Dia Del Rio, and participating in BEMP. Now, Mark shows this dedication, one way he shows this dedication is by continuing his support of these programs past retirement, and by driving his students over 100 miles one direction just to do monthly monitoring with BEMP. Mark's influence on his students is undeniable, and his support of students are undeniable. Many of his students have gone on to create careers, not only in the sciences, but in other fields as well. So it is a great honor for me to be providing this award to Mark. And on behalf of everyone at BEMP, and with the 2023 Envirothon State Champions, we say thank you, Mark, for your dedication to environmental education.
Well, thank you, guys. This means a whole lot to me. I don't know if I'll use them. They may just sit right on my dresser. Thank you.
Hello everyone! We would like to thank all of the participants in this year's Crawford Symposium, as well as our participants, funders, partners, and stakeholders in all of the BEMP activities this year. If you'd like to donate to BEMP, please visit bemp.org/donate.
On behalf of all of us at BEMP, we say
thank you!